In this video, I'm going to show you how to configure Transparent SSO. What do I mean by Transparent SSO? So normally with the Zscaler Client Connector, the endpoint application, you have to add the application to the endpoint through an MDM solution or group policy, or even manually installing the file on the endpoint. And once you do that, it'll then ask you for credentials. So the user or whoever's testing it out, for example, has to type in their credentials in order for their profile and the information to be pulled down to the client. So it's a pretty generic installation and up to that point, and then the things that are specific to their configuration are pulled down once we know who they are. So with Transparent SSO, you can actually utilize the credentials and the token that already exists on, in our example, a Windows endpoint, a Windows 11 machine. So the credentials that I've used to log into this machine are going to be used to authenticate in the background silently against my Entra ID tenant in the Zscaler Client Connector. This obviously improves the user experience. There's less interaction. They don't need to type in their credentials again. It's going to happen for them automatically. So how do you configure this? Well, there are two kind of key parts to this. The first is a custom installation of ZCC. The first thing we need to do is download the MSI or the executable and actually provide some parameters up front. Things like the cloud name, user domain, and there are some other parameters that you can add to that configuration as well. And then the second part is essentially telling the endpoint to trust a particular site on the Zscaler side and go and use the integrated Windows authentication in the background to authenticate that session. So let's go ahead and do it. So the first thing we need to do is I've logged into my lab environment, and this is the Z Identity experience, and here we have the Client Connector portal, previously known as Mobile Admin. If we head in here and go to the admin menu, we can actually look at the store Client Connector installations. I'll head over to this and click on new releases, and we can see the platform we're after is obviously going to be Windows in our case, but you can see you can switch between Mac OS, Linux. There are different versions available, and you can download this in executable format, MSI format, and 32 or 64-bit. So we're going to want 64-bit MSI because my Windows 11 installation is 64-bit. So go ahead and click download, and then I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so I have the installation file on my desktop downloaded from the Zscaler portal. So we can minimize this for now, and here we have our MSI file. So you can download this to wherever you need to download it to. And if I right click this on my machine and head to show more, I have the option to edit with Orca. If I open that, you'll see this is where you can essentially get into the properties of this MSI file, and you can create the MST file that's needed in your group policy, in your MDM, as you deploy your custom ZCC MSI. So to get to this point for Orca, you're going to need to download a couple of bits from Microsoft. So I have the link here. So if you head over to learn.microsoft.com, this may move by the time you see this video, so simply search for it. But what we're looking for is the Orca exe, and this is the program that I just showed you here that allows us to edit the file in the way that we need to edit it to accommodate Transparent SSO. This is part of the Windows SDK, so you would need to head over to this link, download the Windows SDK, and then you would find the file. On my machine it was in C program files, Windows kits, 10 bin, and in an x86 folder you will find the executable, but you don't necessarily need to open it up from File Explorer destination where it's been installed. Once it is installed, you can simply right click the MSI and choose to open as I showed you with Orca. Once you open this file, you're going to want to head to Transform, click New Transform, and then the properties you need to edit. You can edit any of these things depending on your requirements, but for the simplicity of the demo for Transparent SSO, the two we're concerned with are the cloud name, where we would specify Zscaler. This could be different for you. I know that my cloud is zscaler.net. Your tenant may be on a different cloud. Just check which cloud you're on and put that specific cloud here. Now, because I'm on Zscaler.net, I don't need to put the .net. I just need to specify Zscaler. Leave this in here as well as the value -- cloud name. The property is a separate entity to the actual value, so it won't know that this is -- cloud name, and it will look for that. So don't delete this and put Zscaler or your cloud name, just put a space, then your cloud name. The second field you're going to want to edit is the user domain, or UD. Again, leave the -- user domain, and my domain for the users, UPN and primary SMTP, is bscaler.com. So I've got my bscaler.com in user domain, and I have my Zscaler cloud name in CN cloud name. Go back to transform and generate transform. And we can save this. You can see I've got multiple different versions here that I've been experimenting with. So I can just name this, this is my Orca transform with cloud name and user domain. I've saved that. So the next thing to do is create a group policy. You can use Intune or another MDM solution. You can use SCCM, or you can simply put the files on a network share and install them manually if you're just testing. But for the purposes of the demo, I'm going to use group policy objects, and I've got Windows Server 22 on the left of your screen and a Windows 11 client on the right. So the first thing we're going to want to do is on the server OS is put those files somewhere the client can see them, or somewhere that the group policy can automatically go and use those files before we create the GPO. So on this server, again, you can put these anywhere you need to, but I've put them in a folder called Zscaler Files, and then I've gone ahead and shared that. I've probably overshared it just to make sure the demo works. So obviously you'd want to tie this down a little bit more in the real world, but this share contains both the MSI file, which I copied from my laptop locally through RDP onto this box, and I've got the MST file that we created as well using Orca. So once the files are there, we can go ahead and create the group policy. So I created a test user in a dedicated organizational unit in Active Directory Domain Services. So if I open users and computers and show you the structure, it's a pretty basic Active Directory, but under the default directory I have Zscaler OU, and in here I've placed my SSO test user and my Windows 11 endpoint as well. We now open group policy management. We can see the group policy that's been created. So you can add this at the level you feel appropriate, but I've created one directly against the OU, and I've set that for it's linked. It's got inheritance because there are other GPOs that need to apply in my environment. But essentially what I've done is create a group policy that says for the computer configuration, you need to edit the software settings for the computer configuration. Essentially, you edit the software installation settings and you add a new configuration in here that essentially says you want to deploy a new package. You select your MSI file, you open that. You want to make sure that it's assigned, and in the properties of the one you can see that's already here, you will find modifications, and this is where you call out your MST file. So this is the path to the .mst that we created using Orca. So it knows to install this MSI and use this MST for customizing those attributes that we changed, those properties that we changed with the Orca program. Switching over to the client side, and let me expand this so you can see it clearly. We just want to open up the internet settings on this machine. So head over to Internet Options, click on Security, Trusted Sites, and here you'll see I've added a wildcard for my domain, bscaler.com, and zslogin.net because of the way that my Zscaler tenant is configured. I've also got the Microsoft Azure AD, more recently known as Entra ID, but this is the auto logon URL for that, and also logon.microsoftonline.com, all in the trusted sites. And this is something else that you know, I've done this manually on the endpoint itself, but you could create a group policy that would also add this to the trusted sites for your estate. Once that's done, it's just a case of applying the group policy. There may be a re-authentication required, and then we'll take a look at what it looks like when you log in for the first time. So I'm just logging into the Windows 11 machine with my SSO test user account. This user has been granted ZIA and ZPA entitlements in the portal, and is a part of my Active Directory I did have to sync the user using AD Connect. It had to be an included OU, the test OU that I created for this transparent SSO connectivity. And you can see in the bottom right corner there of the screen, internet connectivity or ZIA and private access or ZPA have both established a connection immediately after I've logged in. If I open the client, you can see that I have a connection. I'm authenticated in ZPA, and in internet security, the same story. So I'm actually, the service is on and it's recognized that I'm on a off trusted network and that I'm connected.